Hi everyone. Good morning, Chitra. How are you?
Good morning, Asif. I'm wonderful, thank you. Nice to see you.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we are pleased to be with a truly multidimensional personality. And I don't say that word lightly. It is a multidimensional personality. Dr. Chitra Anand is a renowned author, a celebrated speaker, a professor, an educationalist, and an entrepreneur. She has done an MBA from Kellogg School of Management and a PhD from Bradford University. She also has degrees from Harvard University and Wilfrid Laurier University. That's more education than I can imagine. And she serves on the advisory committee for Forbes School of Business and Technology and for University of Ottawa and teaches as a professor at Centennial College. And most importantly, from our perspective today, Dr. Chitra is the vanguard of entrepreneurship, which will be the crux of our discussion today. She has done great work that shows how to keep on the leading edge of markets, technology, and consumer behavior. And here she is talking to us today. Dr. Chitra, thank you very much for accepting to speak to us.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure and an honor. So, thank you for asking me, and I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, and then we'll start and see where it goes.
Absolutely. On the professional side, as if I've grown up in the technology industry, accidentally fell into it during the tech boom back in the 90s. It was really quite interesting because I had no idea what was happening during that time, and I was offered a role to take on in the tech industry. I knew nothing about technology, but what I did have was a deep-seated curiosity to learn about it. And I did know that it was going to be a powerful force that was going to change fundamental industries. And I've always had this very natural, curious, I suppose, disposition, if you will. So I've spent about 25 years in the tech industry, believe it or not. I'm older than I look
Mhm.
or seem. Um, I've spent time at OpenText, which is a software company out in Waterloo. Beside the infamous BlackBerry, it was the Tech Triangle. I was the director of operations and leading sort of that organization to a growth trajectory during that particular time. From there, I went and spent 10 years at TELUS. So I spent, the majority of my, I would say, foundational moments in my career there. And I had a wonderful career there. Every couple of years, I had an opportunity to change roles and etc. And during that time, I was also doing an MBA part-time at the Kellogg School of Management. And so I was at TELUS at a very interesting time when there were a telco and they were transforming into an integrated communications provider. So they grew through mergers and acquisitions, and I was always at the forefront of leading that transformative change within that organization. And so, the vast majority of my role varied from sales, post sales, sales enablement, if you will, marketing as a core component of the sales environment. And my last post there was working in the office of the CEO. And it was really to drive strategic initiatives on growth and expansion, etc. So I had a wonderful career trajectory. And it was there where I started to observe. I always was like this entrepreneur operating inside this big company. I always was always trying to find different ways. Working for a big telco is very slow, it's very lethargic. It's a big organization just by design because of the size and complexity of it. But I always found myself, wanting to take risk, which was at that time, going back now 15, 20 years, wasn't something that was highly regarded, or people were, kind of wanted to stay the course or the route. And it is a highly regulated industry. So, why do we need to be, progressive or provocative or take risks or, try different things? But I always had this desire to really push the needle on certain things. And that's when sort of the ethos of my thesis, which was around entrepreneurship, started to percolate in my mind. And then from there, I was headhunted to go to Microsoft. And Microsoft at the time as well was going through a massive transformation. They were a software company, at the time, and we're transforming to devices and services into a company today that we know as mobile and cloud. And I was hired to help drive that transformation. And I've always been drawn to complex problems that the more complex, the more muddy they are, the more interesting they are to me, because I believe that there's always opportunity, within all of this chaos. And so during that time as well, I defined my thesis, and I've had a love of academia my whole life. My parents are academics, and so I also wanted to leave a bit of a legacy, if you will. So whether I was working in the corporate world, I loved academics. But I want to make a contribution in this space, and my contribution is going to be my doctoral research around entrepreneurship. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since the time I stepped foot in a corporate environment. I believe that organizations can scale innovation through this concept of intrapreneurial mindset. And so from there, I started my thesis, which took me 10 years to do. It was a part-time thesis. So I was working, having a family, and working and writing a doctorate in the UK. So and was able to defend that in 2020. And that's sort of the ethos of my career and my doctorate research.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I think you made some important points there. One is that chaos interests you, and that is good because growth always lies in chaos and not in order. So chaos to order, and then order to chaos, and then chaos again. That's how we grow. And complexity has always attracted you. We'll talk about that later in our talk. But entrepreneurship first, which is what you mentioned, and you rightly said, businesses are increasingly recognizing the need to be more innovative in order to remain competitive, and they are looking for ways to improve their inventiveness. And as you said, there's no better path to growth than through creative activity within the firm. And that is your battle cry. That's for internal entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurship, your passion. And then you also described how you got interested in entrepreneurship, which is amazing. What I would probably benefit from your presence on is how the importance of entrepreneurship has increased, because it was always important within the organization, but it's been recognized, one, and propagated by champions like yourself, but the importance has significantly increased. What makes it so critical for a company in today's world?
Well, it's a very good point and a very good question. I mean, if you think about sort of the trajectory of organizations, the biggest, I think it's twofold. Number one, I mean, everybody knows that innovation, I mean, it's this overused term, is the gateway for growth and sustainability. But that translates into many different things. It's not just about new products to market. It's really around new ways of doing things across the different disciplines. And from my perspective, that, talent is certainly the new competitive differentiator. And it's the talent, it's the people that are within organizations that are going to help them realize how to take advantage of those opportunities. Um, so my thesis really looks at people, talent. Talent is where we have a big talent problem right now. For example, with it's very hard to find with the COVID and this crisis that we've been through, is there's a mass exodus in the workforce. So it's really around these people who are going to unleash the opportunities that we call innovation. And I've always been of the mindset that a lot of companies have these innovation think tanks and hubs, etc. And my thinking has always been that innovation is not just one person's job. It's something that has to be embedded inside the organization, across the organization, and it's at the very grassroots level. People that are out in the field, people that are doing things, whether you're in HR, finance, ops, regardless of what kind of role you're in, it's not just up to the leaders. It's really up to the people that are actually doing the work And so it needs to be this mindset, this way of operating. And so what I've done essentially is I've challenged, the thesis has been as if that if the world has changed, if the world has fundamentally changed, then organizations need to change as well in terms of how they operate and how they think and how they move work and how they empower people, how decisions are made, how creativity is cultivated. And so that, is the essence of what's going to scale and ensure that companies are sustainable in the new world, because all of these external factors are constantly going to be thrown at them, whether it be it a pandemic, be it a new technology, be it a new disruptor, etc. So that is really what's driving all this.
That's amazing. So basically, you're saying that a business, regardless of its size, can be the epicenter of innovation, of entrepreneurship, or are there certain industries or a certain size that is more conducive to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. So, when I think, I mean, obviously it's more large, complex organizations, because that is really what is sort of the Achilles heel, if you will, for companies. Because in order for companies to scale, they absolutely do need process and governance and policies and procedures, etc. However, those also come with a cost, because it's the cost of actually being creative. It's the cost of being able to take idea A and push it through to its fruition. Um, so yes, I mean, that's sort of how it started, but observations in market are looking at mid-sized companies now. And as my work evolves and as the research evolves, I really do think that it can be applied to many different things. And we often see startups that start to become mid-sized companies, and then you lose that entrepreneurial spirit because of size and complexity. So size and complexity is certainly a function of that. Now, you asked about industry. I believe that it's across all industries. I mean, no industry is immune to disruption, and I'm going to talk about that on Saturday. I mean, every industry, whether you're incumbent, whether you are a dominant player, needs to be careful, because there will be some market force that will cause some level of disruption. So these organizations absolutely need to have this preparedness sort of institutionalized within their own organizations.
Yeah, no, that's a very important point because the lifespan of dominance has decreased significantly in our times. It's not that you gain leadership and you can be perched on the top for a long period of time. There are a lot of disruptions. You made a huge stride, and all of a sudden, the entire premise of technology on which your stride was based becomes disrupted or challenged. And then you mentioned that complexity also breeds or is a fertile ground for entrepreneurship, and the complex companies benefit more from entrepreneurship. One point that you mentioned that interests me is that cost of being creative. Yeah, there is a cost for encouraging people to be creative. Their time can be misinvested, their efforts, and most importantly, the budget. So you think that, have you seen the difference in your work that the companies which are more tolerant of their employees' mistakes in terms of trying to innovate or being creative are more creative and innovative in the long run?
It's interesting because, when you go inside the guts of an organization, there is, and maybe some companies do it better than others. You hear all the tech companies, the Googles of the world, etc., where they allocate a percentage of time that allows people to be creative and, equates that to playtime, right? So you can think about ideas, initiatives, concepts, you can test, etc. At TELUS, for example, there was no time that was really allocated. And I think that part of the problem was that people need time to think how we're working. People often say, well, we have a productivity problem. And I would argue that we don't have a productivity problem. We have a thinking problem. It is how we actually ideate, test ideas. I'm a big fan of, micro experiments. It's really how work is produced. How are we thinking through critically what we're trying to solve for? And even before that, I often, when I was at Microsoft, I would encourage my team to really think about how they approach their work. It's their approach to work, so that they make better use of their time, so that they have the time and freedom to be able to think. And that thinking time is the creative time on the things that you're trying to solve for. That translates into, a culture question. Do we have a culture of innovation? Do we have a culture of an entrepreneurship that is embedded throughout the organization? It's not a one-off thing. It's how I approach my work on a day-to-day basis. Do I have research embedded into the way I do work? Do I have time to read? Do I have time to reflect? Do I have time to talk to people? Can I take those insights and turn it into something meaningful? So those are the things that we need to think about when we think about how work is done.
So, from what you are saying, is it fair to derive that uh, entrepreneurship is not just a domain of more developmental or product development or research and R&D sections of a company? Regardless of your place, entrepreneurship can help you do whatever you're doing better and find better ways to improve processes, gain efficiencies. Is that true? Is that a fair comment?
It's a fair comment. Absolutely. I mean, really, entrepreneurship, the true definition of it is really about people. And it's a people within your organization that challenge current ways of doing business. And so they're not afraid to experiment and do things differently. But what the output really is a new way of doing business. And so how does that translate? So when you think about entrepreneurship, there's sort of two or three sort of pillars to that. Number one is identifying behaviors of intrapreneurship. And then number two, how to support those entrepreneurs who possess the qualities and attributes that are entrepreneurial, right? So it's number one, being able to identify what those people are, how to best support them. And number three, how to then institutionalize that within your company. And so whether that is through as you just said, being more productive or being highly creative, those are the outputs of that. And so, it's really this trifecta of being able to bring it all together.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I wonder, how can employees and leaders look for entrepreneurship in their colleagues or in the people they hire? Is that also a remit of what you advise and what you teach people, how to look for those qualities, those characteristics? Is there a way to go about it?
Absolutely. I have about 75 traits, and then I'm going to talk about my top ones on Saturday. So I don't want to give it all away, but
Okay.
absolutely. It's all about having those traits. One of the things that I often say is that you can be taught to be entrepreneurial. And so part of the role of leadership, and I have a whole module on leadership, is it is incumbent upon leaders to be able to cultivate that within your talent pool. So absolutely.
Yeah, no, thank you. I will not steal the thunder from your Saturday address, not at all. But one thing that you said is you can be taught entrepreneurship just now. And so that, what is the balance? Is entrepreneurship how far you can educate people and how far are you born with the genes?
It's the same argument about, you know, can you be creative or can you be taught creativity?
Yes.
I believe that you can be taught to be creative because this is really around how we think. It's a thinking paradigm.
Yeah, but some people better disposed genetically to be creative, or it's a fair game for everyone. Everybody starts at the same level.
It is, absolutely. And I mean, I think about this a lot because I'm quite fascinated. My next book that I'm writing about is the neuroscience of innovation.
Hmm.
So I'm quite fascinated by the brain. I'm quite fascinated about things that we're capable of, things that are taught. The fact of the matter is we are products of how we've been conditioned. So imagine, we're conditioned to think a certain way, and we take those preconceived notions and ideas, and they're kind of travel with us throughout our adolescence and into our working lives, and then we go to work, and it's almost like going back to reassess some of the things that we learn. Like, for example, curiosity is one of the most highly desirable trait of an entrepreneur. And I'm going to talk about this on Saturday, but I'll share a little tidbit right now. Our curiosity peaks by the age of 8 to 10 as children, and then something happens around that. It peaks. We're highly curious, and I see these in my young children, constantly wanting to try things, experiment, asking ideas, asking questions, but we're conditioned to sort of mute. Something happens by the age of 12 where our curiosity diminishes. And so I go back to the school systems as well. Like, I'm really fascinated about what's happening, and I see my young kids, and when you're curious, you're being disruptive, you're asking too many questions, and they're muted, and all of these things that are happening. So our curiosity very naturally diminishes. And so it's things such as that nature. It's like, okay, well, we're born, babies are naturally curious, but then what happens along the way? And then how does that translate into when we become adults and we start working? What happens to our level of curiosity? And curiosity is a fundamental core of being innovative and being entrepreneurial. And it's one of the most important things that you want to cultivate in your people, is being able to challenge what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. You want these people to be bringing those insights and poking holes at what you're doing, because that truly is the litmus test in terms of sustainability and innovativeness in how we've viewed it, and how we define it.
Very good. You know what fascinates and intrigues me in what you just said? The title of your new book, and obviously it's subject also neuroscience of innovation, because there has been so much advanced thinking in neuroscience, so much development over the last 20 years. And innovation also is a great subject. So it must have been a fascinating topic to research and write on. I'm waiting for the book. So, one thing, what would be your advice for aspiring and emerging women entrepreneurs?
That's a big question. I have so much. I mean, for
Just
women
forgive.
entrepreneurs, I'm deeply passionate about women in business, women entrepreneurs, women in the corporate world. Uh, it's very tough. I feel like I want to be as optimistic as I can be. I think the approach that people, and not just women, women have been impacted greatly over the last 5 to 7 years, and particularly with the pandemic. You've seen a mass exodus of the workforce, and women are starting to do their own businesses because of the limitations that have been put on them in terms of how we work, which is very unfortunate. I would almost say to take an athletic approach to what you do.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, and I'm quite fascinated by athletes. I'm an amateur athlete myself.
Mhm. Very good.
I draw parallels between athleticism and work. I've run a marathon. I've never been a runner in my life. I've done a duathlon, which is a bike and a run, and then I did a half Ironman. And I never knew how to swim, but I taught myself how to swim.
Mhm.
So it took me 8 hours to complete, but I finished it.
Wonderful.
And so I was fascinated. There's a lot to be learned about from athletes and business. And I would say, when I say take an athletic approach to it, what I mean by that is it is a journey. It is not a sprint. It's a marathon. And sometimes it's a hurdle. And so you need to take the mindset of, there are going to be things along the way, and they're simply hurdles, and you have to leap over the hurdles and keep going and be like an athlete. Keep going, keep training, keep growing, keep this mindset of discipline, etc. And it's very easy to get set back. It's very easy to get redirected due to rejection. Rejection's tough. It's very easy. And a lot of women that I speak to get very discouraged. And I would say, to a lot of the women, Asif, that I've spoken to that have reached out to me, visible minorities, non-visible minorities, they would say that it's not the work that they're challenged with, it's the fight. It's this constant turbulent sort of force. But that is what it is. Those are the environments. So we need to take an athletic approach to how we follow our journeys in the work that we do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very apt description. Athletic sports teach us a lot, and especially in business, you mentioned perseverance, you mentioned enhanced ability to deal with failure because athleticism or competitive sports teaches you that. And probably a couple of other things that are very important are that athletes know how to peak at the right moments. That's very important. Now, they don't fritter their energy away in the moments that are not important. And so, use of energy, not only the use of time, that comes with athletic training and competition. So, whenever people are talking to a multi-dimensional personality like yourself, a polygonal personality, one question that probably people ask you often is, what do you do the best?
What do you mean? What do I do?
What I mean is that you are a wonderful mother. You like academia, but at the same time you have a very pragmatic side, and you are a businesswoman, and then you are an athlete. So, what is it that you are best at
That's like
in your own opinion?
that's a big question to answer. What do I do best? I don't even know if I do anything best, but I try my best. So I would say, I do love business. I've always loved business. Even as a young girl, I remember, trying to figure out what it was going from high school and selecting the schools, what's the path that I'm going to take. And I would honestly say that I'm really just passionate about solving problems. And I'm a very pragmatic thinker when it comes to problem solving. And I would say one of my superpowers is to be able to simplify complex or perceived complex topics. And I think when I think back to when I was hired in the tech industry going back like 25 years ago, is technology at the time was very complex. And one of the things that I could do was explain it in a way that was very easy for people to understand. So I would say that was certainly one of my superpowers, but I am multidimensional. I think most people are. But what makes us really amazing as human beings is when you can do and have interest in many different things, because all of those things complement the work that you do. So I'm very passionate about the work that I do. And if I wasn't a mother, and if I wasn't an athlete, if I didn't love to travel, if I didn't love to learn, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do, because all of those things contribute to my thinking, to the output, to whatever it is in terms of the work. So I would encourage people to be multidimensional, because that to me is you're doing yourself a service, and it's a much richer sort of growth from a growth perspective, in my opinion.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Most people are multidimensional, but very few of them have the opportunity or the perseverance and focus to enrich their lives in as many ways as you have. So that is something that you must be commended for, and you can be an example to others in that life can be enriched in so many aspects and not just one in the exclusion of to the exclusion of all others. And then you mentioned problem solving, which obviously jives in with what you said at the beginning, that the complexity attracts and intrigues you and you like handling it. You talked about a number of skills, athletic skills that you taught yourself, you became good at, and how you went about learning them. In the end, would you share a skill that you taught yourself in business, entrepreneurship, or as a leader? And how did you go about learning it? A skill that really makes you proud that you have learned and you've taught yourself.
I would say that I'm most proud of the fact that I'm not afraid to fail, try and fail. And I think that that's just a function of being multidimensional. Like, I didn't know how to run, I didn't know how to swim, and I'm not afraid to go into an organization to say, and I'm not afraid to not know about something, to say, I don't know about that, but I'm willing to try and take risks and there will be an element of failure, but that's okay. There's no shame in failing. There's zero shame in failing. I'm not afraid to fail. And I think that comes from doing many different things and failing and being comfortable with it. You're comfortable in your own skin. There's no shame. And maybe it's a culture thing for us, Asif, because I've been raised by immigrants. We've had, tremendous failures as a family, and I watched my dad and his career and my mom and trying to build a life here in this country, wonderful country. And I've been observing and I observe, but then when you go into organizations, there's this fear of failing because you're going to be labeled or you get fired or you get reprimanded. But I don't really have, if we're afraid, like that fear, and I try and instill that in my kids, like it's okay. Like there's no shame, because the greatest disservice that you can do to yourself is not even try. Like who cares if you don't know? Go learn and try again and fail again and try again. And that's okay. And so having that mindset inside companies should be at that level. I mean, you're not going to fail and bring the company down, and you have to be mindful in terms of how you fail, but you can fail with grace and you can continuously do that. And so I would say that that is something that I've learned along the way and I'm most proud of, because I don't have shame in that, and nobody should. And that is, a true foundational pillar of innovation and entrepreneurship, and how companies really should be operating if they want to support the type of environment that's truly needed in this post-pandemic world.
Yeah, I think that is very eloquently expressed and very well explained, because fear of failure or fear to embrace uncertainty keeps us, all of us, undersells all of us. So basically, I think to conclude, would you agree if I say that the entrepreneurs are not afraid of failure? That's a basic trait across all entrepreneurs and innovators around the world. So, in order to make a transition, either for the company or the individual from being an employee to an entrepreneur, the first step would be to ready to embrace failure, ready to fail. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think on that note, we will again thank you very much for your time. It's been very enlightening talking to you. We only seen a very minor flicker of the flame. We wait to discover more. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you on Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you.